So the topic is, can we measure beauty, golden ratio and Fibonacci sequence? Well, let me tell you that this subject is my favorite one, and I have been thinking on this for many years. By and large, the consideration of beauty in general and beauty in mathematics, though these two things have to be separated, at some point of time, I think they merge. Beauty in nature, beauty around us, beauty in various things have been a driving force for many. And in the context of science, I have been thinking on this for many years. So, in a way, it is subject close to my heart. I like to talk on this. I like to discuss on this. And beauty is not something to be talked about. I like to watch beauty also, of course. So this is not topic to be discussed. So I definitely like to watch beauty. In fact, my opinion is that the driving force of many decent lives is beauty. See, I heard that the average life expectancy is about 70 in India now. Average life expectancy. So, in a way, if you think very philosophically, one comes to this earth and lives for about 70 years and disappears. Some childhood of first, whatever, 6, 7 years, and old age of last 5, 6 years. There are a few active years. So, what is real driving force? So, the answer could be different for different people. The driving force could be position, money, and so on. But for a decent life, I suppose, decent quote unquote, I always feel that beauty is the driving force. Beauty in various forms, beauty in music. We want to hear Lata Mangeshkar songs. Why? It doesn't give us any benefit in terms of, you know, monetary or business wise or ethical. Or, but we keep doing such things. We go to picnic, we watch nature. Why do we do that? Because in some sense or the other, we are behind beauty. We watch movies, we go to exhibitions, we watch paintings and so many other things. So many we go to sport event, we watch matches. So there is underlying factor of beauty hidden everywhere, and that attracts us. That is my feeling. That is the driving force. And that these examples that I have given you are beyond mathematics, or any common man or any man who lives a worthy life is behind such things. And that's a driving force for such people, for everyone for that matter. Now we want to intersect this area with science and mathematics, that the driving force of scientists, driving force of mathematicians, their lives revolve around mathematics. So the general notion of any human being of a beauty, that is certainly carried to a scientist also, and scientists also do science, mathematicians do mathematics for pursuing this beauty in some sense. So I will give some evidences in this lecture and discuss beauty in the context of mathematics in particular. See, if you go to different areas, biology, physics, astronomy, then again one has to test beauty in the respective areas. In any science, social science, any branch of knowledge, this has been an important factor. Therefore, aesthetics is an important branch in philosophy. When one wants to ask question, why about our existence? Why are we here? So these basic questions are asked in philosophy, though I am not expert there. But aesthetic sense, aesthetic appeal, aesthetics in general is studied very vastly for huge number of years, only because of the fact that it is very important to our existence. See, Aristotle has done some kind of hierarchy of knowledge. So which knowledge is at the top and how the hierarchy goes down. So material sciences, like science that is, or the sciences that are important to material lives, like suppose engineering. So see, I'm not doing any value judgment. Please don't misunderstand. But they are at the bottom in some sense. And music, mathematics, philosophy are at the top. So in the hierarchy of knowledge, this aesthetics goes at a very high position. Philosophy goes at very high position. Music is at a very high level. Mathematics is at a very high level. Why? Because they are more basic to life. Earning money and living is important. Okay. But in overall perspective of philosophers, these things, these philosophical matters like sense of beauty, acknowledgement of beauty, appreciation of beauty, conduct of this beautiful behavior has a major role. Therefore, these questions are very important, and especially a scientist, a mathematician would like to answer this, because many people feel why people do pure mathematics. Applied mathematics, people feel that it is important because it is used, it is by definition applicable. Buildings are constructed, bridges are constructed, it has utility value, and mathematics is used there. So that is applied mathematics. In computer science, mathematics is used, the applied mathematics. But for example, number theory, pure algebra, pure analysis, lakhs of mathematicians work in pure mathematics, that is subject for the sake of itself. They don't bother about its utility. Utility is a secondary value. Aesthetics is a primary value. My opinion, these are all my opinion, personal opinions. Please don't take it as kind of universal. These are my opinions. That the utility value, many people mistake as a primary value. Okay. And these primary things are taken as secondary. And then there the conflict of life or confusion starts. This is my opinion. So to me, this subject is very important, and especially when science is measured only as whether it is accurate and useful, I feel that the third dimension has to be given, that whether it is beautiful. What is aesthetic sense behind science? What is aesthetic appeal behind science? That has to be answered. Okay. So with this background, let's move ahead and see what I exactly want to say. So I talked about aesthetics of science. See, we talk about aesthetics of poetry. There are critics who tell about whether the poetry is good or bad. They make some kind of judgment. There is a yardstick with them, and they measure the beauty in poetry. Pictures also are evaluated. The critics of paintings evaluate the pictures. In sports also, for example, I am a tennis fan, so I can say that between Nadal and Federer, two greatest tennis players who ever took racket in their hands, many people immediately say that Federer is aesthetically more great. His game seems to be natural. You can feel that you can play like Federer, but when you go to ground, you come to know that you can't. But some factor of beauty is there, and that factor is simplicity. I'm coming to this value later on. So simplicity. Tendulkar's game is beautiful because it looks very simple. His stance is simple, his style is simple, it's very compact. So something that we like, we should be able to evaluate why that is good. Now these are about sports, paintings, and so on. What about a theorem? What about a scientific statement? Can we talk about it aesthetic? So if I say that Newton's laws are beautiful, does that statement make sense? Does that statement make any sense? Okay. So I will ask you some questions also, and let's make it more interactive also. So I would like to ask you a few questions once I go through this outline. Before going to the main body of the lecture, I will ask you some questions also and take your opinions on this as well. So from science, then I want to go to mathematics and talk about beauty in mathematics. So though the topic of the lecture is can we measure beauty, but then this beauty I primarily focus on science and mathematics. Then I will give some concrete examples where one can feel. See, beauty is a sense. Beauty is a sense. One senses beauty. If you see something beautiful, you say that, oh, beautiful. Oh, what a beautiful. So you sense this. So it's a sense. Okay. And then this practical things like golden ratio and Fibonacci sequence, those are things in mathematics, very divine in some sense. In fact, the golden ratio is sometimes called divine proportion. They are very divine things in mathematics, but they are purely mathematical objects, both golden ratio and Fibonacci sequence. But they capture some essence of beauty in variety of ways. So we will talk about golden ratio and Fibonacci sequence also. So this is outline of my lecture. Now, before going ahead, let me ask you some questions. So have you ever thought about this notion of beauty? Many times you have said to many objects that this is beautiful. What is that you have in mind when you say that something is beautiful? Can somebody tell?
Sir, excuse me, sir. I feel instead of beauty, is it correct to say happiness? We get happiness by seeing something.
Well, happiness is a totally different, it has totally different value attached. Okay. Beauty is a sense that you have after experiencing it. I will not say just watch, listen, sense, understand, whatever it is. Happiness comes out of
Beauty.
after you touch beauty, you are definitely happy.
Yes.
But these two things are different. Okay. You become happy, of course, if you become happy when you see something beautiful, if you hear something beautiful, if you listen to some good song, you are happy. But then what you have heard is beautiful. What about that? Have you thought about what is beauty?
I mean, happiness is the result after seeing a
Is a
beautiful
result.
thing.
It is a result
Yeah.
of beauty.
Yeah.
But
Seeing
when you say something beautiful, why do you say that? Have you thought about it? Why do you say?
temples
What
in
happens?
seeing temples in South India, they
Say that, oh, great, fine, beautiful. Suppose if you see some rose flower, for example, you don't analyze its size, shape, color. First thing is you say that it's beautiful. So it is something that comes to your mind. But what exactly happens?
It
One has
may
to.
be the outlook. It may be the
Mhm.
outlook and the overall effect immediately you get, and it reflects on your mind.
And on the contrary, yeah, you're right. You're right. Effect on your mind comes very close. And on the contrary, something that is ugly, also you identify immediately. Oh, this is not. This is very shabby. This doesn't look good.
Yeah.
This is
Yes.
disproportionate. Various, words you may use. But what I
Sir,
want to say
which
is that, bolo, bolo.
suits eyes,
Yes,
suit,
go ahead.
suits the eye.
Soothes the eye. Okay, okay. Eye or ear or whatever,
In
any sense.
all five sense. Like if we touch also, then also we
Five, five is okay, but any sense, for example.
yeah, any sense like sometimes smells also.
See, if you
So,
understand some proof, okay,
May I, may I,
it's not
but
eye, it's
soothing
not
to
ear,
the
it's
eyes,
not
like
nose.
eye catching, like something.
so
If you
may I
understand some nice proof and you say, oh, very good proof, very elegant proof, it's not eye, it's not ear, it's not nose, not
so
five
may I,
sense.
may I?
Yes.
Yeah. See, in past we have been told, or we have been experienced something that is, we are told that it is beautiful. So we compare it with what we
Mhm.
are seeing now, and then we say, yeah, okay, this is also beautiful.
Okay, okay. Well, think
sir,
about beauty more. Think about beauty more. Keep watching beautiful things. And when you see beautiful things, ponder upon it. Think what's going on in your mind. Okay, let's move ahead, and I will ask more questions to you. Now, let's see what mathematicians and scientists have to say about beauty. See, Poincare has done a big study on aesthetics of science. In particular, some of you must have heard Poincare's name. Poincare is a great modern time topologist who turned geometry into more abstract nature, and he was a very influential mathematician. Henri Poincaré, French mathematician. The scientist does not study nature because it is useful to do so. See, not utility. Utility is not the value. He studies it because he takes pleasure in it. First of all, scientists study nature because they take pleasure in it. And he takes pleasure in it because it is beautiful. So has nature been ugly, scientists would not have motivation to study nature. And many great phenomena in science, especially physics, chemistry, have come out of observing nature very carefully. But why one wants to observe nature? Nature is source of inspiration. But why? Because it gives pleasure. And why it gives pleasure? Like you say, you are happy. Why it gives pleasure? Because nature is beautiful. So driving force for scientists is beauty. Okay. Since the primary object of scientific theory is to express the harmonies which are found to exist in nature, we see at once that these theories must have aesthetic value. Same expression again. Okay. Primary object of scientific theory is to express the harmonies which are found to exist in nature. That is primary objective, remember. Primary objective of a scientist is this. And therefore, we at once see that these theories must have aesthetic value. Otherwise, why do you go about? Why do you study all that? The measure of the success of theory, see, look at this. Measure of the success of theory is in fact a measure of its aesthetic value. So which theory is more successful? See, Newtonian theory of gravity is very successful. Why? Because this is it is aesthetically very nice. Only three equations gives you everything about the dynamics of a moving object. That's a great thing. They are beautiful laws. Force equal to mass into acceleration is a beautiful equation in that sense. Okay. It captures much of the information. E is equal to mc square is a wonderful equation. So the measure of success is in fact the measure of the aesthetic value, since it is measure of the extent to which it has introduced harmony in what was before chaos. So before Newton, gravity was a chaos. People didn't know why things are falling down. It was chaos. Okay, people will just wonder why, what is going on. Okay, or some misconception was there. So exactly removing that misconception and bringing harmony, a piece of harmony in this world. That is beautiful. And that is brought by these laws, by these scientific laws. So therefore they are beautiful. The measure in which science falls short of art, very important. So where science can fall short of art is the measure in which it is incomplete as science. This is Mr. Sullivan, again a very great mathematician. Then Hermann Weyl, who has written a nice book on symmetry. Some of you, I don't know whether you're taking notes, but all books are not given in references. When I'm talking, I may give some references. So Hermann Weyl, a nice book on symmetry, especially it is on group theory. So my work always tried to unite true and beautiful. Remember now, new word comes, true. True is a very, very decisive. True is a very, very difficult word to understand. You think on this. What is true? Difficult, very philosophical. So Hermann Weyl says that my work always tried to unite true with beautiful. But when I had to choose one with the other, choose one or the other, what is to be chosen? I usually chose the beautiful. See the choices of the great mathematicians. You see this. Therefore, I'm giving these quotes. Scientists always are behind beautiful, remember. And there is misconception about mathematicians, that they are dry, they are depicted in movies like anything. They are very dirty people, very dry. They are wandering on the street here and there like that. They are not like that. They are behind beauty, in fact. Okay. This is a famous quote by G.H. Hardy. We have made G.H. Hardy in Ramanujan's lecture, and after that also great British mathematician, and his book Mathematician's Apology. This quote is taken: there is no permanent place in the world for ugly mathematics. You can do something nonsensical, something correct, but not very beautiful, very abstract, doesn't make any sense, doesn't connect with the nature. Then there is no permanent place for that. And Russell, all of you know, great philosopher, mathematician. Mathematics, rightly viewed, possesses not only truth. So it possesses truth, but not only truth, but supreme beauty. The beauty cold and oyster, like that of a sculpture. The true, there is a typo, spirit of delight, the exaltation, the sense of being more than man, sense of being more than man, which is the touchstone of the highest excellence, is to be found in mathematics as surely as in poetry. This is all about aesthetics of science. Great people have already talked about it. Now let's come to the question that I raised. How do we think about beauty? How do we, I will not say defining such terms could be difficult, but how we at least perceive beauty. So is beauty reducible? Now this reducible is a word in philosophy. Reducible means, can you reduce certain concept to some list of objects where you can spell out. So given something abstract, now you reduce that to some concrete things and say that, okay, this is beauty. So people have tried that, to reduce beauty to some, concrete objects, which you can say that, okay, so harmony, simplicity, symmetry. Now these also have to be defined, but this is at least less abstract than beauty. So beauty is something that we say that we just sense, we cannot easily, perceive this, we cannot easily express. Okay, so reduce this to this term. So if we say something is symmetric, then it is one attribute at least of beauty. Something very, very simple, like I told, Newton's laws of motion, and I will give more examples to you. And remember, simplicity and complexity both are sometimes beautiful. Okay, I will come to such examples later. Then harmony, something that brings peace, something that brings harmony, something that brings, order from chaos, something that brings unity, some generalizations. Okay, that is some kind of reduction of the concept of beauty. Now in science, where do we find, now especially I have written mathematics, but the theory can be extended. So where do we find this beauty? So in mathematical objects, see, mathematics is written, communicated in certain ways. So there are axioms, there are theorems, there are more theorems, there are corollaries, there are applications, there are examples. Examples become theorems and things like that. And something then becomes worthwhile as to call it as a theory. Then that theory is sometimes depicted as a, and a certain theorem, there are several proofs over the years. So this is how mathematical body is created. Now, if we want to find out beauty, these are the objects. So can we really pinpoint that, oh, this in the entire chunk, these axioms, for example, I can tell you, I already told Euclid's axioms are beautiful. There are only 5 axioms. I already talked about fifth postulate. Fifth postulate is so difficult to understand, and it diverts the attention, and it played a drama for 2000 years. So there lies the beauty of the writing those actions, thinking of those actions. So that thought is beautiful. Then there are some definitions. Concepts mean there are some definitions in mathematics, which once you do, see, modern times example, I can give many modern examples, like definition of a measure, definition of a manifold, okay, definition of a determinant, definition of a group. So many nice words or concepts capture a lot of information. Then there are different theories, proofs also. I will give you examples of proofs, some visual models, like models of Riemannian geometry, models of hyperbolic geometry, several other simple models also, school level models. So there you can find out the beauty. Now, what is role of beauty? Role of beauty, So Poincare says that the role is motivation. Beauty is the driving force. Beauty is something that motivates you to go further. And another is heuristic guide for the choice. Like I showed you one quote. See, suppose one wants to study mathematics. See, this is mathematics for everyone course. If somebody takes inspiration and wants to study, that person should feel that I should study. For that person, the content should be beautiful. One has to make that as a natural choice. So something you want to do as your natural choice from your inner voice should tell that it is beautiful. Therefore, I'm doing that. Otherwise, I'm not interested. I don't feel interest in doing this. See, unfortunately, so many people keep doing things in lives in which they are not interested. I will tell you a very, very glaring example, and you will be surprised to know this. All of you must have heard a tennis player, Andre Agassi. Have you heard his name? Andre Agassi?
Yes, sir.
Many of you.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, who played from 1987 to 2006. That is his period of active tennis player. Now you will be surprised, he played tennis for more than about 20 years, but he every time said that I am not interested in sports, I am not interested in tennis. All his life he was not interested in his tennis. For going to every single match, he never wanted to go. He always was not sure, I don't want to play. His inner voice says, no, I don't like this. So if you want a reference, you read his autobiography. The name of the autobiography is Open. And the childhood thing has so much of impact on Agassi that he never wanted to. He was forced to play when he was very, very young, like 3 years, 4 years old. And that created hatred in him. Okay. Anyway, that's a totally different. But people keep doing excellent things also. You know, he is supposed to be a great player. He has won 8 Grand Slams. But he never wanted to do that. Whereas Roger Federer is born to play tennis. He always wanted to play tennis, and see the difference. Okay, anyway, if I talk on tennis, I would have arranged one lecture on tennis, I feel. Okay, anyway. Is there an epistemic link between aesthetic properties and epistemic link means is there a link with respect to knowledge-based link between aesthetic properties and truth? This question I will take up. Truth and aesthetic. Many people, many great scientists, I will give quotes also, feel that something is so beautiful that it cannot be false. It has to be true. So truth has to do with the beauty. Something so beautiful, how can it be false? How can it be false? So truthness has to do something with beauty. That is impression of some mathematicians also. I will show you. Okay, again Poincare, because Poincare has given a real thought to this aesthetics. I'm not speaking up now. This can be taken as something beauty that we are talking about. So Poincare says that I'm not speaking, of course, of the beauty which strikes the senses. So you says that 5 senses. So this Poincare says that we are not talking about that. Of the beauty of qualities and appearances. So he's not talking about, okay, bird watching, something like that, and beauty of heroines in the movies, they are beautiful. He is not talking about appearances. I am far from despising this, but it has nothing to do with science. What I mean is that more intimate beauty, which comes from the harmonious order of its parts. Parts is very, very important. A certain theory has several parts, and from within, harmonious order in its parts, and which pure intelligence can grasp. Now, all these words are very difficult, and one can speak for hours on what is intelligence, what is pure intelligence, and so on. Therefore, once upon a time, few years back, I wanted to give a full semester course on aesthetics of science, and I made preparations toward that, but because of the busy administrative schedule, I could not do that. So these are the attributes that we have been talking about. We want to talk more about that: symmetry, simplicity, unification, and truthfulness. This we have touched upon, and we'll illustrate this in some time. See, this number of primes is infinite. Okay, so this is thought of as one of the most beautiful statements. All of you know what are prime numbers. Do you know prime numbers?
Yes,
All
sir.
of you know
Yeah,
prime
yeah.
number 2, 3, 5, 7. I don't want to say 9, 11, 13, 19 and so
17.
on, 17, 19 and so on. Okay, so these are prime numbers. Now, do these prime numbers end somewhere? Because as numbers will grow large, there are several possibilities for factors. So now one may think that later on you won't get any prime numbers. Okay, but the number of primes is actually infinite. So let me just illustrate quickly how it goes about. Where do I go? I will go here and okay. I go next page and right here. Okay. Can you see the board, Mandar?
Yes, yes, sir.
Open board?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So we want to prove that the number of primes is infinite. Infinite. Quickly, I will do this. Proof. None other than Euclid. Suppose. Yes, anyone wants to prove this? Because proof should not be given right away.
With contradiction to the hypothesis, we start with suppose they are finite.
Okay, suppose there are only say k primes, only k primes say p1, p2, pk. Then what you do? K is arbitrary, that is finitely many primes. Then you form another number, say n, which is 1 plus product of this. That is great idea. That is beauty. That is the beauty here. How does one think this like this? So suppose you have only finitely many, then you can multiply finitely many numbers and add 1 to 8. Now what happens? Because these pi's are bigger than or equal to 2 and you are adding 1, none of these pi can divide n. Okay. So pi does not divide. This is symbol for does not divide n. I from 1 to k, all k. So then what is n? What is n? N is prime or composite. Every number has to be prime or composite. Bigger than 1 has to be prime or composite. So this is another, it has no prime divisor means it is composite. N is, it has no prime divisor means it is prime. N is prime. N is prime. But we have said that these are only primes. These are only primes now. So that's a contradiction. Very simple proof. Have you understood the proof? All of you? We assume that there are only finitely many primes. But then we have produced another prime which is not among them. That's a contradiction. Have you understood this? Yes or no?
Sir, 3 and 5 are primes, right? If I do 3 into 5 plus 1, so it will be 16, no? So it is not a prime. A 1 plus P1, P2 up to P.
No. I am taking all primes. Under my assumption, I have finitely many primes. I have taken all and multiply. You are taking only 2 primes.
Okay.
See, my assumption was wrong, of course. I want to prove that number of primes is infinite. But suppose you assume finite, then take all of them and multiply. Suppose there are finitely many, then multiply all of them and add 1. Now you have produced a new number which is not among P1, P2, Pk and not composite also. So it's a new prime which is a contradiction. Have you understood?
A bit.
Okay. Think about it later. I will go ahead and then we can discuss it again. Where do I go now? Yes, here. So number of primes is infinite. Okay, I will also illustrate. See, what is beauty in this proof, earlier proof? What is beauty in the earlier proof? Beauty in the earlier proof is construction of that n. That n is very elegant. Now we see it is very simple. But then thinking about doing this process, entire process, first of all, proof by contradiction, and then finding this product plus one thing. So Pythagoras theorem, let me also illustrate. Okay, this is Mandar. Can you see this?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. So given triangle is ABC, though it is drawn somewhat inverted. So ABC is given right angle triangle, and we all know the statement that in right angle triangle, the lengths of the sides, their squares, A and B, A square plus B square is square of the hypotenuse, that is C square. Now, how do we prove this? So by simple geometric constructions, by compass and ruler, one can duplicate this triangle in this fashion. That is, you can extend line AC and find point D, and that D is such that AD is equal to B. And similarly, you can have DE, okay, such that DE is equal to A and ADE is right angle. Now, because of these two triangles are congruent, because SAS proposition gives these two triangles are congruent, therefore these angles alpha beta are also equal. Now alpha plus beta is 90, therefore this angle BAE is also 90, because alpha plus beta is angle C, but C is 90, and this alpha beta and BAE is 180, but alpha plus beta is 90, so BAE is also 90, and this is C, because triangles are congruent. So if AB is C, AE is also C. Done. AE is also C. Is this clear to you? Now what remains is that this is a trapezium. This is a trapezium, and the area of the trapezium is height into sum of the parallel lines in the trapezium. So A plus B into height is A plus B by height is A plus B, and sum of the parallels is A plus B and divided by 2. That is formula for the area of trapezium. And now you calculate this as AB by 2, these two triangles, plus this middle triangle is C into C, C square by 2. Now if you simplify, you get A square plus B square equal to C square. Done. Okay. Is this proof clear to you? Somewhat, at least. I will keep this screen for 1 minute. It is. Proof is written here.
So how that C square by 2 is done there, sir?
C square by 2 is area of the triangle BAE. You see triangle BAE.
Okay.
The sides are CC.
Yes, half into base into height, like that it is.
Half into base into height. Yes, yes, you're right. Very good, very good. And what is 2 times AB by 2? This ABC has area AB by 2, and those two triangles are congruent. So other is also AB by 2. So AB by 2 plus AB by 2. So 2 times AB by 2. But on one hand, if you apply formula for the area of trapezium, you have A plus B by 2 into A plus B. So area of trapezium, once applied formula as area of trapezium, and then 3 triangles areas are added, and then equation is formed, which is nothing but Pythagoras equation. Understood?
Yeah.
Very good, very good. And okay, the interesting story about this proof, this particular proof. Okay, now this particular proof is also very elegant, and it is given by a non-mathematician. See, people in this particular group are interested in mathematics, but they are not mathematicians. They are maths lovers, and they can also do some new mathematics. You will wonder, anybody knows who has given this proof?
First time I saw, sir, this kind of proof. I always remembered.
Yeah, but I have not given. It is not my proof. Let me tell you, you have seen it here for the first time. This proof is given by James Garfield, who was President of United States in 19th century. President of United States. He was a politician, but when he was young as a senator, he and his friends wanted to kill some time. So some friends say, okay, let's look at Pythagoras theorem. Okay, so these friends were sitting in some canteen room or something, and they started talking about Pythagoras theorem. And this James Garfield, who later on became president of United States, he actually at that time gave this proof. This proof that I have shown you just now. This is by James Garfield. Unfortunately, he was shot on a railway station when he was president. But I am not sure how many politicians now can give proof of Pythagoras theorem. I am not sure. Anyways, even if some of them know the statement also, that is also great. Okay, the sum of the angles of triangles equal to right angles. I will not give proof here, but I leave this as exercise. Okay, now some exercises start. Some mathematics I have already started, because after so many weeks, one should get feel of doing some mathematics. So all of you know that sum of the angles of triangles of a triangle is 180 degrees. That is 2 right angles. So next Saturday, let's see the proofs of this statement. So bring the proofs of this. That is exercise for you. And that is also very elegant and very beautiful proof which uses Euclid's axioms. And the last thing is, see, first 2 I gave you proofs, 3rd I leave to you, and 4th I cannot give you, because cannot means it is impossible to give proof in whatever given finite time or whatever, 4 hours, 5 hours, 1 hour. It's a very big proof and it's algorithmic proof. But what the statement essentially says is a very beautiful statement, that any plane map can be colored with at most 4 colors. You may take any complicated regions in that map. The only condition is that it is drawn in a plane. So any plane map you can color by using at most 4 colors, with the condition that the adjacent regions will not have same color, because you want to identify the regions. So adjacents should not have same color, and satisfying that condition, you can color any map by at most 4. You don't need 5 colors. Nivedita madam, is the statement correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now some beautiful formulae. See, as I told you, where do we find this beauty? So I gave examples of some theorems. Now let's see some formulae which are also theorems, but which have numerical quantities in it. Look at this left hand side, pi by 4, and this odd number series which is alternating. 1 minus 1 by 3 plus 1 by 5 minus 1 by 7 and so on. The beautiful formula. The proof is also beautiful. Okay. And this series is sometimes called Newton-Gregory series, but now we are propagating the fact that this was proved by Madhava. We have one complete session on Madhava. At that time, I will come to this statement as well as its proof. Okay. So this pi by 4, pi is already, I have told you, is a very complicated number. But the right hand side looks very elegant. Right hand side is sum of these quantities. But this infinite number of quantities and alternating series, that alternate signs, gives you this mysterious number pi by 4. Isn't that very beautiful combination? Yes or no? Do you sense the beauty or not? Yes? I mean,
Slowly,
I should not force beauty on you, of course. I should not force.
Sir, I'm digesting the concept slowly.
No, one should not force the beauty, like shout, see, this is beautiful. That's not good. That's not beautiful. That's very ugly. But try to sense some beauty out of it. Look at this. Look at this. 1 by 1 square plus 1 by 2 square plus 1 by 3 square is sum of squares, reciprocals of sums of squares. Right hand side. Very innocent looking right hand side. Only not innocent thing on the right hand side, that is the infinite series. But from where pi comes? And again pi square. See, from where these combinations come, that is question related to beauty. From where these combinations come? Look at right hand side, look at left hand side. And then see the equality sign. From where the hell these two quantities should be equal to start with? But they are. It has been proved. The proofs are also very nice. Look at this simple equation. I is square root of -1. For some of you knows complex numbers. Then this is Euler equation. This is Euler's equation. And this is also very, very simple. So many complicated things are already in the equation, but the answer is 0. I is imaginary number, the pi is already mysterious, E is equally funny number. 1, if you add, then there's such an elegant equation. Impossible looking equation. Left hand side is impossible, but the right hand side is 0. And now look at this. This is monstrous. This you cannot comprehend, cannot even read. Even professional mathematicians, if you ask proof of this to me, I cannot give. Even specialists also will fumble. This is summation n from 0 to infinity something. Then inside that there is product. This pi that is written, this symbol is product. Okay. So this symbol is nothing but the product symbol. So there is some product, and then that product is summed over n, this infinite series already, that is convergent, and that converges to this integral. My God, my God. Can you guess who must have proved this? Or who must have written?
Ramanujama.
Wonderful, very good, very good. No one else can even think of such nasty equations to say. But now you see, mathematicians or experts have said that there is beauty in simplicity as well as the giantness, the largeness, the complicatedness. Like many times in philosophy, you say that some Brahmarup darshan or Brahmanda, it's huge, but then it is beautiful. It makes you, go into some other kind of this thing. So something very, very complicated, very, very huge is also beautiful with some other notion of beauty coming into picture. Okay, now I have a puzzle for you. Try to solve this puzzle. Read for yourself. We have two identical glasses. In one we pour wine, in the other water to the same height. So there are two glasses. Then we take a spoonful of wine from the first glass, put it into the glass with water, and then mix it. Next, we put a spoonful of this mixture into wine again in the first glass. Thus, at the end, as the end result, some wine goes into the water and some water goes into the wine. Which is more? That is the question. The pure wine that went into the water or pure water that went into the wine. I will keep this for a minute. You just read this. What I will do is, for the want of time, because I may run short of time, I will put this puzzle in our group. And then you may bring the solutions next time. Why I have included this in the beauty lecture, this lecture on beauty? Because the answer is very elegant. I should not have written answer here, but I will quickly go to the next slide. The answer is very, very elegant. So is it okay if I put the puzzle on the group?
Yeah.
Yes. I will put the puzzle on the group, and then you try to solve this and submit your answers on the group or submit your answers next time. Okay, let's come to the institute seal. What does institute means? In mathematics, the institute means the Institute for Advanced Studies at Princeton. That is one of the greatest places of carrying out research in pure mathematics. That is situated in Princeton, which is about 50-60 miles from New York, and a very nice place. I was fortunate to visit there and stay there for a month. Wonderful place and great place. You get to see many great mathematicians there. So when it was founded, the director of the institute, before going for any financial help, other administrative things, first thought of creating a seal for the institute. Seal for the institute, which will actually give message for why this institute is founded. See, there is no BSc course, MSc course, PhD course, nothing. It is only exploration of new mathematics. And the assumption of the institute is only those great people can go there. Go there means as not like me who just visit for some time, can be employed, can be appointed there, who know everything that is already printed. and they do only new things. So the first director, Abraham Flexner, thought of creating a seal which will depict these ideas, that this institute is that great. Now you can see what all is there on this seal. Can you see the seal, Mandar?
Yes, sir.
On the left it is written truth, on the right it is written beauty, and in between there are two women. Left hand side to me is a naked woman, and right is well dressed ornamented woman, and in between these two women there is a tree. Okay, many times we say naked truth. So the truth and beauty, and in between the knowledge tree goes. The tree in between this is the knowledge tree. So with let the knowledge tree grow. That is the seal of the Institute for Advanced Studies. Okay. So so much of research they carried out for creating this seal. But then these two are main things for them, for any great institute, for any great research: truth and beauty. And the motivation to do this was this poetry by John Keats: beauty is truth, truth is beauty. That is all. You know, earth and all you know to know. John Keats. Now this is Abraham Flexner design of the seal. I will not go into the details of this history of seal. Now let's see what Heisenberg say about truth and beauty. If nature leads us to mathematical forms of great simplicity and beauty, we cannot help thinking that they are true, that they reveal genuine feature of nature. Okay. Now I come to golden section. Let's go quickly. This is a regular pentagon. Now this regular pentagon has property that if you join diagonals, you again get a pentagon inside pentagon, and that continues. You see this picture? Joining diagonals of pentagon gives again a star, that is again a pentagon. Then again join diagonals and so on. Not only this, if you consider these ratios of where the diagonals cut each other, they cut in a certain very specific ratio, and that leads us to the golden ratio, something called golden ratio. So I will explain. So this is defining relation of the golden ratio, that is A by B is equal to A plus B by A. Okay, or in some other words, okay, what one wants is that if you have a straight line like this, okay, and this is A and this is total length, okay, and this part is A and this part is B, then A by B, that is ratio of larger to smaller, let's say, is equal to the ratio of the whole to larger. So this cut is a golden cut. People feel that this creates beauty if you have this kind of proportion. So ratio of larger to smaller is the ratio of whole to larger. Okay, this is the defining relation, and this leads to these algebraic quantities. See, this ratio was initially identified by Euclid, and is called as ratio as extremes and mean ratios. So A by B, now you divide by A, then 1 plus A by B, or B by A, it should be A by B, A by B. Okay. 1 upon 1 plus. So this relation one gets A by B equal to phi, then 1 upon 1 plus phi you get. There is some algebraic mistake here, but ultimately you get the relation phi equal to 1 plus 1 upon phi, and you get equation phi square minus phi minus 1 equal to 0, which is a quadratic equation, and one has formulae for solving quadratic equation. One root comes out to be negative, so you discard that because these are actual ratios, so you get 1 plus root phi by 2. So that is the golden ratio, that is called the golden ratio. And if you want to write approximate value, then it is 1.6180333, like that. The great fact that I liked about golden ratio is that if you continue writing 1 plus 1 upon 5, then one of this phi again is written as 1 plus 1 upon 5. There is again something wrong here, but you just forget this quantity. This is not wanted there. 1 plus 1 upon 1 plus 1 upon 1 1 upon 5 and continue. This phi is again written as 1 plus 1 upon 5. Then next phi is also again written as 1 plus 1 upon 5. This is called continued fraction expansion. In Ramanujan lecture, we briefly discussed about what is continued fraction. Okay. Now the recurrence relation for the golden ratio is obviously because of this equation, you just multiply by 5 to the power n both sides, then you get 5 to the power n equal to 5 to the power n minus 1 into 5 to the plus this. That is the powers, earlier two powers if you add, you get next power. Thus, if you consider the sequence of powers, the earlier, see, the third term is phi square, which is 1 plus phi. Phi cube is 5 plus phi square. So, the next term is sum of the earlier terms. Okay. So, therefore, you get this phi square is 1 plus phi. Phi square is 1 plus phi cube is 1 plus 2 phi. Pi raised to 4 is 2 plus 3 pi and so on. So this gives us the Fibonacci, famous Fibonacci series, where the next number is addition of earlier two. That is 1, 1. You must have heard Fibonacci sequence, right? 2 plus 1 is 3, 2 plus 3 is 5, 5 plus 3 is 8. Add earlier 2 and find the next term of the sequence. Okay. Now this is famous golden spiral where you construct a rectangle of size 1 cross 1, then 2 cross 2. Now from this 5 cross 5, you extend this to 13 cross 13. So the remaining one is 8 cross 8. Okay. Now this 8 cross 8 and 5 cross 5 leads to 13 by 13. Above this, then 13 by 13 plus this 8, this height was 8 below rectangles, you give 21. And then this spiral touches this. And that is why it was observed that in sunflower petals, you get exactly these spirals going from one side to the other and this side opposite. They form these Fibonacci spirals actually. They form Fibonacci cycle. I think in Abhijit's lecture, you must have seen this sunflower thing depicting the Fibonacci numbers or whatever, golden ratio thing. Now let's come towards the end of the lecture because it's already time. So this is Vitruvius, was an architect, again a Roman architect. And I will directly go to how Vitruvius applied this golden ratio to human body. Okay. See, this is the human body that we are talking about and how a perfectly shaped human body will exhibit golden ratios. Okay. So let me show you this by, all right. Mandar, can you see this?
Yes, yes.
Find the golden ratio.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Okay. Now can you see this rectangle? This is torso. म्हणजे याला धड म्हणतो आपण शरीराचं. That is golden rectangle. That is the smaller side to larger side. The golden ratio is maintained. Then arms to torso. That is also a golden rectangle. Then the entire body. This is golden rectangle. See, the proportion must be this. The nozzle up to the legs and the above part should be a golden rectangle. So these two should be proportional. Sometimes we say that some people legs are very long or legs are very short. Then that symmetry is lost. So if it is exactly in that golden ratio proportion, that body is in complete shape. Okay. Similarly, we can go to some other pictures also. This is by Vitruvius, the architect, who actually constructed so many nice constructions, buildings by using this golden ratio. Mandar, can you see this picture of Last Supper?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is again Leonardo's very famous painting, that is Last Supper, the Last Supper, that is the day before the death of the Christ. So this window that is drawn and the Christ is there, that window is a golden rectangle the black wall behind that, see, therefore the picture looks nice. That is golden rectangle. The entire wall, the proportion of the whole to the larger, see, the entire proportion also has to be correct. So your canvas also has to be of correct size. And if you want to see all the lines, they fall like this. What is the most famous painting of Leonardo? Isn't it Mona Lisa? Have you heard this, Mona Lisa?
Yes.
Okay. Now see this. Why it looks beautiful? Because of this golden rectangle. See, head up to face, that is golden rectangle. Then from the lower cheek to nose, there is some proportion. So the face, entire face follows certain proportion. Then proportion from head to the torso. Then entire painting has this golden, it is painted in golden ratios. Okay. You want to see all the lines, you can see like this. Okay. So this is Mona Lisa painting, and we saw that the golden ratio, quickly at least we saw. I know it should be given more time. So these are concluding remarks. There is a need for more scientific development of aesthetics of mathematics, scientific development. More writing should come up in all languages on aesthetics of science. Then mathematics students should develop senses for experiencing beauty. See, if you don't have that sense, however object is beautiful, you will not sense the beauty. You will look at it very dryly. I feel that the life is waste. If you cannot appreciate beauty, if you cannot experience, if you cannot internally analyze it, then why are you living? Okay, in some sense. I mean, there are other material things. Okay, job, position, money. Okay, fine. But I am now talking about beauty. So one should strive to develop the senses for experiencing the beauty. Naturality in relationships and forms have to be restored in abstract generalizations. See, in mathematics, now it has become so abstract that it has lost the original naturality of the relation. Therefore, in abstract subjects also, if we see something very simple, some simple relation about simple objects, then we say that it is more beautiful. So in abstract generalization, the naturality of the relations and forms have to be restored. Mathematics, see, this last sentence is mixed up. Life is beautiful. That's what I wanted to say. And mathematics helps in identifying and experiencing life. So that is one purpose of learning mathematics. And for us, like those who have studied mathematics, we always say that we are in driver's seat because we can experience nature's beauty around us more cleverly, more intelligently. We can experience beauty more because mathematics helps us in doing that. There are some references. Okay. Rothstein's book is especially very nice. And main part, see, some large number of concepts I have not touched upon in this lecture. As I told, one can deliver a series of lectures on aesthetics. For example, music I did not touch upon. I just briefly talked upon some pictures, Leonardo, that's it, and concept of beauty. But I did not touch upon many other beautiful things and which are connected to mathematics. We had lecture on mathematics and music, but that is how mathematics actually appears, like golden ratio. But what is intimate relation of music and mathematics, I did not touch, which you can find in this Rothstein book. C.P. Snow is a famous book on two cultures. I wrote one article a few years back. There is a special book of Mathematical Association of America on golden section. And then history of geometry, my article also, I have made some discussion on this. Thank you very much.